This is Into the Mix, a Ben & Jerry's podcast about joy and justice, produced with Vox Creative. I'm Ashley C. Ford. It's Saturday evening in St. Louis, trivia night.
Give me your name one more time.
Inez.
Oh, Inez. It's so close to my name, which is Inez. You're at table 5.
At the front door of the Old South Broadway Athletic Club, flanked by bowling tournament trophies and Pee Wee Soccer League portraits, Inez Bordeaux is welcoming new arrivals as they trickle in.
Hello. Do you know your table number? What? 13? Lucky 13.
We hope so.
Well, I am table 14, and I just want you all to know that I am actively rooting against you. And that's okay.
The room is buzzing, and Inez is setting the tone.
Check out on your table, you have a packet. Check out all the ACD announcements in your packet. Also, the first round is in your packet. You'll have 10 minutes to complete it.
Sitting down, I quickly realize this isn't just a chill, laid-back trivia night. Everyone's got their game faces on. Round 1. Name that St. Louis monument.
Are we gonna raise some money tonight? All right, which table's winning again?
This is not your typical trivia night. It's more of a party with a purpose. That's what Arch City Defenders, our hosts for the evening, call it anyway. ACD is a holistic nonprofit law firm in the St. Louis region. They help people secure housing, transportation, and other needs. They represent people who get trapped in the legal system for free, and they fight for their people like Inez. This isn't just a room full of trivia enthusiasts, it's a room full of abolitionists. They're people who fight to put an end to systems that incarcerate people, starting with one jail right in their backyard. A jail where many people in this room, including Inez, spent time. A jail they've made sure never harms another person again.
Yeah. Okay. Exactly.
And Inez is one of them, leading the chant and demanding a brighter, better future for St. Louis. How do you describe yourself?
I'm a mom of 4. I'm an abolitionist. I'm a nurse. I'm a hellraiser. I kind of consider myself a badass, sometimes a rebel rouser, a rule breaker. And I'm a Black woman, just trying to make my way through life.
In other words, Inez Bordeaux is a force to be reckoned with. And it took all of her will to survive the medium security institution known as the Workhouse, a hotbed for injustice in St. Louis since it began operating in the 19th century. In St. Louis, people landed in the Workhouse because they couldn't pay their cash bond or bail. So when Inez says she's an abolitionist, it means she doesn't believe people should ever be in prison or jail because of poverty, racism, or other systemic injustices. Most prison abolitionists feel the same way. They believe society should focus our resources toward making sure each person has what we need to thrive, which would then make police and incarceration obsolete.
Experiencing what I experienced and watching other women go through it and know that there were thousands before us and there were thousands after us who had experienced those same things, that's where I was radicalized.
The Workhouse was a pretrial facility, a jail where the accused were detained while they awaited trial if they couldn't pay their way out. And by all accounts, it was a place of horrors.
Sometimes it just feels like people get snatched off the street, and they kind of do. And then they just pop back up. And for a long time, for many decades, when that happened, like, people were disappearing into the Workhouse.
Oh, my goodness.
If you are Black in St. Louis, you've heard of the Workhouse because you've either been there yourself or you know someone who has been there. I've been hearing about like the conditions of the Workhouse and the things that people have experienced while being there for years and years and years and years. Like, we all knew that it was infested with rats and roaches, and hearing the stories of like people's experiences inside of the Workhouse, hearing about the gladiator fights and, gladiator fights. There were correctional officers who were making people fight gladiator style for food.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So everyone's heard the stories, but I thought they were exaggerations. You know what I'm saying? Because, we embellish a little bit.
For sure.
We a little creative license in our storytelling. Like, you think there's no way in the world that that's happening. There's no way in the world we're keeping people in these sorts of conditions. Like, there's no way that we are holding people like this.
And yet, people detained at the Workhouse reported extreme heat in the summers, devastating cold in the winters, rat infestations, mold, and let's not even get started on the violence allegedly perpetrated by guards, like gladiator-style fights. But Inez's journey to the Workhouse and toward abolition was a 7-year ordeal, 7 years of abuse. Her life was turned upside down. She was separated from her children multiple times, all while she tried her best to pull her life back together again and again. And that's the case for so many people jailed in places like the Workhouse across the country. The fact of where we are today in these United States, justice is never handed to us. Justice is something we fight for every day. And that's exactly why we're here. This story ends with a victory because people fought for justice. Because Inez and the incredible group of abolitionists she's built power with, created community with, they stand on business.
And because I'm a petty Scorpio, I'm always gonna get my lick back.
This season on Into the Mix, we're bringing you 4 stories of joy and justice from the front lines of the greatest fights for justice. Starting here in St. Louis, where we'll spend 3 episodes with Inez and the team that put an end to the terror of the jail known as the Workhouse. Episode 1, a Scorpio walks into a jail. Let's get into it. How would you describe St. Louis to people who haven't been here, aren't from here? When they ask you, what's St. Louis like? What do you say?
It is the greatest city in this country.
Yeah.
Or it would be if it wasn't for the murderous police department and crippling poverty. It would be the greatest place. It's very much a city that has small town feel to it, but we've got like everything.
What are some of your favorite parts of the city? Some of your favorite spots that you're like, you can find me there?
Yes, I'm a South Side girl. I love the South Side because it's incredibly diverse. Incredibly diverse. You can find everything that you need on the South Side. Tower Grove Park, which is about 5 or 6 minutes from my house, is where like they do Pride every year. And, concerts in the park and food truck Fridays and things like that. They have like the Jewel Box and in Forest Park and like playgrounds and stuff. It's just the community. The South Side community is very inclusive and welcoming, and like we protect our own, we fight for our own. So it's like I'm never leaving. I'm so sorry. I'm just never leaving. I'm never leaving. I was born on the South Side, and I'm gonna die on the South Side. I'm gonna die on the South Side. So that's my favorite part of the city. here's the workhouse.
Just looked over and saw it.
We pull into a scrubby parking lot. Even though we're just 15 minutes outside of town, it feels far away, like another planet with the gravity turned up. Heavy. A guard tower looms over a rambling, low-slung building. The front entrance reads, Medium Security Institution in bold metal letters. Welcome to the Workhouse.
Oh my God.
Is this not the most depressing damn place you've ever been?
It's quite depressing. Oh my gosh.
And you can't tell from the front, but it is huge. It goes pretty far back there. The entire land is 23 acres. When you walk in, the very first thing you notice is the smell. I don't know if I have the words to describe like a mildew. It's like nothing I've ever smelled before. Like that's literally the first thing you notice is like the smell. And then for me, the very next feeling that I felt was despair. I legit thought I wouldn't make it out.
Most of the people inside the workhouse were there simply because they couldn't afford bail. In fact, 99% of the people jailed at the workhouse were awaiting trial and presumed innocent. 99%. That's virtually everyone who ended up there. And still, the average length of stay at the workhouse was more than 250 days. That's more than 8 months. It's May as I record this. What was your life like in September 2023? How much life have you lived? Friends have you seen? Family have you loved on and been loved on by since then? 8 months for fines and fees as small as $100. Even more troubling, 87% of the people detained at the workhouse were Black, even though Black people make up less than half of the population of St. Louis. And after all of that, about half of those cases, the cases that funneled people into the workhouse, were dismissed outright in the end.
I got the ticket for no driver's license and no insurance.
Here's Deidre Wortham. She was held at the workhouse for 22 days in 2017 for a traffic ticket from the 90s that turned into a $250 cash bond.
Well, at the time with my driver's license, I was waiting on my ID to come in the mail. It's been so long ago. Yeah, 95 or 96, somewhere around in there.
In the years that followed, Deidre got pulled over a couple times, like any driver. The cops would ask her about that old ticket and tell her to take care of it, until they didn't.
In 2017 or 18, this police, he didn't want to let me go. So they locked me up for that ticket. And I went to jail. They transferred me over to the workhouse. They put me in a room that was all the way in the back of the jail in the corner. And it was so hot in there, right? You couldn't cover up. Like, it was so hot in there, you barely could catch your breath. See, I got asthma, and I'm dealing with high blood pressure. So it was real hard for me to catch my breath, and there wasn't nothing coming through that vent at all. The vent hadn't been cleaned in years.
A rat ran through her cell that night, while bugs crawled over her bed. She attempted a shower and was horrified to find the walls coated in mold. She went more than 2 weeks without critical medication, despite asking for it daily.
I did not know that all of this was going on down there. And this was all for this ticket, right? I could have bonded out of the workhouse for $200. If I would have gave them $200, they would have let me go, and I wouldn't have had to do the whole 22 days. They just would have let me go. But I was like, I needed that $200 to pay my rent, and I ain't have no extra money. Now, this is what the judge said. I have done time served. And she was going to let me out, but she going to let me out on 6 months probation for a traffic ticket. I have never heard of nothing like that in my life.
The St. Louis Workhouse was originally built in 1843 when the city was still young. While its location changed over the years, its function never did. It has always been a detention for people who couldn't afford to pay debts related to their alleged crimes. But there were some really important differences, too. When we come back, the workhouse of yesterday, the workhouse of today, and the question of its future. Back in 1843, the old workhouse was essentially a debtor's prison. They built it specifically to imprison people convicted of any crime related to, quote, non-payment of his or her fine and costs. It's like this. Let's say you owed someone $50 back in 1843 in St. Louis. You would be taken to the workhouse where you would work every day until you worked enough to buy back your freedom. The work was grueling. 10-hour days in a quarry where men and women chained in manacles would break down stones with sledgehammers. Those stones were then used to build the streets of the city of St. Louis. They literally built the city on the forced labor of poor people. Debtors' prisons, like the workhouse, are a relic from British common law. This relic was carried over by the American colonies. But Congress abolished debtors' prisons in 1833. So if you're doing the math, that means even when they built the workhouse in St. Louis in 1843, it was illegal. Today in the U.S., pretrial detention can kind of function in the same way as debtors' prisons. They are institutions where people are jailed simply because of poverty, simply because they are unable to buy their own freedom while they wait for their day in court. More than 500,000 Americans are sitting in jail awaiting trial, and 60% of them are there because they can't afford to get out. Inez's journey to her time at the workhouse actually started in 2009. And just a heads up, her story includes domestic violence. I know that's a hard thing to hear about. Please take care and come back to this one later if you need to.
My ex-husband picked up a hot skillet off of a stove, and he burned me all over my body with it while we were in the middle of an argument. I had been dealing with domestic violence in my marriage for a while, but that was the thing that spurred me to be like, no more. And so I did what they say you're supposed to do. I left. So I don't mind crying. I just don't want y'all to freak out because I cry all the time, especially when I talk about this stuff. So
Tears won't ever bother me. I'll start there.
Okay.
It will never, ever, ever, ever bother me that
okay.
you're crying, and I can make room for that very easily. Her 4 children were still very young when she left her violent husband and their marriage.
About 8, 6, about a year and a half, and about 6 months. I was working as a nurse at the time. I had been a nurse for like about 3 years. I was making pretty decent money for 2009. I was bringing home about $2,800 a month, which in 2009, that's not too bad, right?
No.
My childcare costs at that time were $1,600 a month. 1,600 American dollars a month. And in leaving my husband, I could not afford to pay my rent and my childcare in the same month. Mm-hmm. So what would happen is like I would pay my rent this month, wouldn't pay my childcare, and then for folks who have kids, they know. When you show up to drop your kids off at daycare, baby, and you haven't paid that bill, they will turn you around right at the door.
They will.
then I would have to call into my nursing job. My ex-husband at that time flat out refused to help with the child care costs, just flat out refused. And so I just got caught in this cycle of eviction notices and not being able to drop off my kids. So I lost a couple of nursing jobs.
After Inez lost her second nursing job, she started to collect unemployment benefits.
And I got a new nursing job, and I kept drawing those unemployment benefits. That $350 that I was getting from the state of Missouri every week for unemployment is how I was able to afford to pay my rent and my child care at the same time. Now, I didn't jump right to like committing a crime. Like I tried everything. I didn't have family support here in St. Louis, and called around, tried to find cheaper daycares, home daycares, I tried everything. Went to the state of Missouri, applied for child care assistance, not once, not twice, but 3 times. All 3 times I was turned down because I made too much money.
Inez made $57 too much to qualify for child care assistance. $57.
Did I commit a crime? Yes. Did I know I was committing a crime? Yes. But my choices were to commit this crime or go back to the man who picked up a hot skillet off of a stove and burned me all over my body with it. So I decided I was going to commit the crime. Right. And I did for about a year. I overdrew unemployment benefits.
Eventually, Inez's babies got bigger, and she didn't need as much help. So she stopped drawing from unemployment benefits around 2010. But then...
Full transparency, I like to speed. I have a need for speed. I love to drive fast.
In 2011, Inez drove the kids down to Texas to visit her mom.
And so I don't know if you've ever been to Oklahoma, but it's a perfect place to drive fast.
I've been to Tulsa, and just the little bit of driving around we did, I totally get why you would want to open it up.
Flat.
Yep.
You can see for miles, baby. It calls to me.
Yes.
Do you hear me? It calls to me. And so, like, I'm doing what I do. Like, we're flying through Oklahoma. We are on our way back to St. Louis.
And then she got pulled over for speeding.
And I'm not tripping off of it. You know, I'm going to get a ticket. It's cool. I'm going to pay it. Right. But you know how, like, when you get pulled over and it takes the police officer a little too long to come back to the car?
Yes.
So you know something is wrong?
Yes.
So it took him a long time to come back to the car, and that made me nervous. And when he finally came back to the car, he told me that I had a felony warrant for my arrest for larceny. And I was like, what's larceny? I had to ask him, I was like, what is larceny? And he was like, oh, that means you've stolen something. And like, I legit looked him in his face and said, officer, I've never stolen anything but a man in my life. And he chuckled, of course. And I chuckled. And he was like, it's a felony warrant. I have to take you into custody. My 4 children were in the backseat. He drug me out of the car, arrested me.
Inez was in a jail in Oklahoma for 30 days. Eventually, she was transported back to St. Louis, where she finally learned she had been arrested because of overpayment of unemployment benefits. The court sentenced Inez to 5 years probation and placed her on the hook to pay $10,000 of unemployment she owed.
And then it all goes away like it never happened. They told me, like, it's not going to show up on your background check. Everything will be fine. My public defender was like, Inez, all they really want is the money. I had been a nurse even longer at this point. So I'm like, I can make $10,000. Like, I can pick up shifts. I can clear this in 3 months. He was like, yeah, pay it off as quick as possible. 6 months. If you pay your restitution, you could be off probation in 6 months. I was like, bet. Except everything that they told me turned out to not be true.
Soon after her court appearance, when Inez's nursing job did their annual background check, it showed that Inez had a felony on her record for stealing over $500.
not stealing unemployment benefits, but stealing over $500.
No.
Yeah. So, of course, I had to resign from my job. This was in May of 2012. By October of 2012, my nursing license had been suspended. I had not been able to find a job because no one wants to hire a nurse that they think steals.
Right.
Eventually, Inez was able to get a job as a certified nursing assistant where she made $8 an hour. Then she was finally able to afford a one-bedroom apartment and live together with her kids again. But as soon as things started to look like they might stabilize, Inez got a new probation officer.
But then that person quit within a week. So I got lost in the system. I was calling and writing letters. No one was returning my calls, and they blamed me for that. I did not know that I had a felony warrant out for my arrest for a probation violation until I was driving and I got pulled over March 7th of 2016. And that's how I got to the workhouse.
Oh, my God.
When Inez ended up at the workhouse in 2016, her bail was set at a whopping $25,000. How many Americans have that kind of money lying around?
I built community with a lot of the women that were in the pod with me. So you get a little bit of out time, then you would go back in for several hours, come out for lunch, go back in, be locked up for 3 or 4 more hours, come out for dinner, go back in your cell, and then you would have like 2 hours of out time, like before they lock you down for the night. And you're there until breakfast the next morning.
Sometimes the detainees would get locked down for days at a time.
There was one incident where there was a fight and they kept us locked up for 48 hours straight. Like, no phones, no showers, like only seeing a nurse if you had already put in like a sick call request. It was a lot to deal with. And then you've got like all of these women who are just there.
Yeah.
And not knowing what would happen like next. The feeling of like you don't know when you're going to get out of here, because the workhouse is where you go when you don't have a bond or you can't afford to pay your bond.
When she finally got her day in court, her public defender told her that she qualified for something called a Basel motion. And the judge agreed.
So then after 6 years of probation, 7 years of dealing with the criminal legal system, not only did I not have a felony anymore, I didn't even have a misdemeanor. The state of Missouri said that the statute that I was prosecuted under should have only been a misdemeanor.
Wow. So everything is off your record.
He wiped it all away.
Wow.
Because he said that if I had been charged properly as a misdemeanor, the most amount of time I would have ever had to do on probation was 2 years.
Oh, my God.
I had been on probation for 6 years. Think about this, Ashley. Think about what that means. Hearing the judge and the Missouri Supreme Court, like hearing them say that this should not have been a felony, this should have only been a misdemeanor. Like, do you know what that means? That means after I accepted that probation, the very next month when my job did its annual background check, a misdemeanor would have never even popped up.
No.
Speeding tickets are misdemeanors. Like, that's the level that we're talking about. I would have never lost my job. Which means my nursing license would have not been suspended. It means that I would not have spent 3 years couch surfing and sleeping in abandoned buildings and sheds and outside. It means that I wouldn't have lost time with my kids. Time that I can never get back.
They can't give you restitution for what they took.
They can't. It is impossible.
Let's step back for a moment. Inez originally owed $10,000 in overdrawn unemployment, and she would have been on track to pay that back working as a nurse until the system over-prosecuted her and put a felony charge on her record. Then that $10,000 turned into a $25,000 price tag on her freedom. If you think this sounds broken, you might want to think about it differently. The system is working just fine. This is the kind of system we get when capitalism and white supremacy prop themselves and each other up. It wreaks havoc on poor people and Black and brown communities. It was designed to be unjust, and that is what it continues to be.
But it was systems that colluded to destroy me.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? And how do you get your lick back against a system?
6 months after her record was cleared, Inez got a call from Arch City Defenders. They wanted to know, would she be interested in joining them to shut down the Workhouse, the jail of horrors where she was held for 30 days, with the funny-tasting water and the smell of desperation? The jail where she thought she might not make it out alive.
And I was like, hell yeah. Hell yeah, I'm interested.
Inez had a special kind of fire all over her being. The kind of fire that ignites revolutions. And we're here at Trivia Night at the Workhouse in St. Louis because this is the kind of fire that can burn a system of oppression to the ground. Inez was just one member of a slow-building team, together with advocates from Arch City Defenders and the community of abolitionists in St. Louis. They joined forces to close down the Workhouse, a place that trapped people with stories just like Inez's. Stories of people asking for help, of trying to do the right thing, and being criminalized instead. In our next episode in this series, we explore how the court system is funded, how it depends on people like Inez to function, and how Inez and the community at Arch City Defenders tap into their collective rage and disgust. They're going to organize and strategize ways to get rid of this physical representation of systemic injustice in St. Louis.
I want people to be angry enough at what is happening to people. I want people to be angry because angry gets shit done.
They're going to close the Workhouse. That's next week on Into the Mix. Into the Mix is a Ben & Jerry's podcast produced with Vox Creative. This episode was written by Priscilla Alabi. The Vox Creative team includes lead producers Priscilla Alabi and Jules Bradley, production supervisor Taylor Henry, and production manager Jessica Bay. Martha D. Sally is our supervising producer. Anu Subramanian is our executive producer. The team also includes Vivian Chi, creative services manager, Ariana Chiffo, senior manager of creative services, and post-production stars Greg Russ, Andrew Hammond, and Felicia Dominguez. Kyle Neal engineered this episode. Original music by Israel Tutson. A special thank you to Kel Young, our sensitivity reader, and Zoe Malik, our fact checker, and to Ariane Young for her support. The Ben & Jerry's team includes Jay Tandon, Jay Curley, Sanjana Mahesh, Chris Miller, and Palika Makam. I'm Ashley C. Ford. Thank you for listening.
Vox Creative.